Hey guys, I hope you're all doing really well. Today I'm going to be sharing with you the finale for my Pan Those Eyeshadows project pan. This was a year-long project pan, which is just crazy that it's already come and gone, but year-long project pan in which I was randomly selecting 6 eyeshadows for my collection and working towards the goal of hitting pan on as many eyeshadows as I possibly could. So each time I would hit pan on an eyeshadow, I'd roll something new into this project, and it was a really great way to familiarize myself with all of my palettes and to play with different color pairings and texture pairings and to really feel like my collection wasn't stagnant. I think last year I really struggled with feeling like I wanted new, I wanted exciting, I wanted more, and this year I actually only added 2 new eyeshadow palettes to my collection, which is just kind of remarkable because the year prior it was way more eyeshadow palettes than that, and I didn't feel like I needed to add anything new to my collection this year. I've been really loving rotating through my palettes and yeah, just getting to know my eyeshadows as a whole, and crazy to think that it's been a year of doing this project pan, but I do feel like it was very successful for me, and I was heavily inspired by my friend Alexi, having done this in 2018 and in 2017, and I cannot thank her enough for all of the inspiration because this was really quite a good learning experience for me and quite a lot of fun. I cannot wait to do it for 2020 as well because I just had such a blast with this project this year. So I'm going to share with you guys where all of the eyeshadows stand that I had in my last update, which was about 6 weeks ago. I know my last update was a while back, but things have just been crazy and I didn't have a chance to film before now. So I have about 6 weeks of progress on these shadows, and yet I'm just gonna say I don't have a ton of progress. So anyways, we're just gonna hop into it. The first palette is the one that's been in here the longest. This is the Urban Decay Electric palette. I've had the shade Thrash in this palette, or in this project rather, for quite some time. I honestly think it's probably been about 5 months since I rolled this into this project, and I unfortunately have not hit pan on it. So this is Thrash. There is a really good substantial dip in this shade, but I haven't hit pan on it. And since I last updated this project at the end of October, I've actually used it 8 additional times, which I think that's the most that I ever used it in any given month, and yet there still isn't pan. And I was really hoping to see pan on this shade, but 8 times was kind of like my max of what I really wanted to reach for it. I couldn't bring myself to wear it more frequently than that over the last few weeks, and I think if I reached for it maybe like 2 or 3 more times, I probably would have been able to hit pan on it. But this is just one of those shades that, as beautiful as it is, it's something that I can easily kind of feel a little bit burnt out about because it's such a vibrant shade and such a memorable shade, and there's only so many ways that I personally know how to pair this color. But I had some fun with it over this past month. I actually, for the very first time, wore it with a color from my Juvia's Place, the Zulu palette. I wore it with the Subculture, the shade Electric. Oh my gosh, such a beautiful pairing with this shade. And I wore it in a crazy colorful eye look on my birthday. So I did play with it in different ways this past month, really pulled myself out of my typical way of wearing it, which had been on the lower lash line or maybe on the inner corner. I didn't really explore with this too much prior to this last month or so, but yeah, unfortunately I didn't hit pan on it. I know I would be able to hit pan on it if I had used it just a handful more times, but that didn't happen. So unfortunately no pan in this palette yet. Hopefully next year I can actually hit some pan in this palette as a whole, maybe not that shade, but just generally I'd really love to see this palette get more loved and used. So yeah, hopefully next year I'll end up rolling it into this project again. This next shadow has also been in this project for many months. It's Colourpop, the Big 3. As you can see, I haven't hit pan on this shade, and that's because it is something that's quite unique. It's something that I can't reach for on an everyday basis. It's this beautiful duochrome, like minty blue green kind of color. It's absolutely stunning, but it's not something that's an everyday staple for me, and so I have reached for it several times over this past month. I actually reached for it 7 times, which is the most I think I've ever used it in a month as well. But I knew I wasn't going to be able to hit pan on this because even with a substantial number of uses like 7, I really only generally wear this either on the inner corner, which is how I'm wearing it today, or a little bit onto the inner portion of my lid, maybe on my brow bone. But in such small amounts, I'm never really able to make a significant dip. However, there is a little bit of a dip starting to form in there, but it would still be quite some time before I'm able to actually hit pan on this, but I'm okay with that. I've been really reaching for it, and it's something that I don't know if I had ever put this shade on my eyes before I had rolled it into this project. So it's been a lot of fun exploring and playing with it and getting to know it and seeing how I compare it. But it's just not something that really was feasible for me to hit pan on within this project. But that's part of the fun of this challenge, is rolling in shadows that throw things for a loop a little bit, rolling in shadows that completely are out of my comfort zone and trying to make them work and finding ways to play with them. So although I haven't hit pan on this shade or even Thrash, it was so much fun to just explore and play with those shades and get to know those kinds of colors that are part of my collection, because clearly they have value to me by having them in my collection, but I didn't really know them. I wasn't really familiar with them before putting them in this project, so I'm happy to have done that within, you know, the last few months of having these shadows in this project. This next shadow is also from Colourpop, and it comes from the Pretty Much palette. This tiny little palette is actually so much fun. I'm so happy this became a part of this project pan, but regardless, I've been working on this shade right here in the middle. This is called OTP, and I hope you can see from there, just offset from the center, there's a little tiny glimmer of pan in there, which I'm so thrilled about, because I've been using this in this project for several months now, just like the other 2 shades that I just showed you. And it was a challenge for me to get use out of this shade. I really needed to push myself to play with this, because this kind of tone is not something that I'm drawn to actually at all. I don't really love like true pinks, and this formula was not the absolute best. It was a little bit sheer, and it definitely took some time, but over the past month I used it 5 times. Majority of those times I wore it paired with the Cover FX Shimmer Veil in the shade Amethyst, and I loved the way that these paired together. It gave Amethyst a little bit more dimension, and it gave this just a more impact kind of shimmer, and they played really well together. So I'm so happy I managed to hit pan on this after this month. Again, I had it in here for several months. I probably used the shadow like 20 to 30 times as a total, and I never really loved it until this past month. So I'm really happy that I was able to hit that goal and, yeah, managed to really fall in love with it as well. The next shadow comes from this palette right here. This is the Zulu by Juvia's Place. I selected the 6th shade in this palette, which is this vibrant metallic blue right here. However, I only reached for that shade 3 times since my last update. So not a ton of progress on that shadow, but as a whole, I reached for this palette quite a lot. This past month or so, it like reignited my love of this palette again. This has been a favorite since I purchased it, but I've like fallen back in love with it again. I wore this shadow quite a lot. This green I paired with Thrash several times and absolutely adored it. These mattes are just phenomenal. So I was making sure I reached for this palette as just like a whole, but I didn't really play with this all that much. This is just not a shade that really like sparks a ton of joy for me. It's beautiful. I really do think it's fun, but it's not something that I want to wear more than maybe like 3 times a month. Maybe 2-3 times a month, because it's just so vibrant and it is not my like preferred kind of color, but I had some fun playing with it and pairing it with other shadows from this project. So it wasn't a bad thing to have in this project. Actually was quite a positive thing, because this palette got so much use and so much love. And the last 2 shadows that I selected last update both come from this palette right here. This is the Urban Decay Born to Run palette, and I bought this palette about 6 months ago, and it's seen some major love from this project pan, which is super cool actually to look at. So I drew 2 shades from here, this one called Ignite and this one called Wanderlust. Obviously there's no pan in either of those shadows, but I wouldn't expect that within a month, and knowing that the end of this project was near when I rolled these into this project, I kind of just allowed myself to not have to reach for them as frequently as I maybe would have reached for other shadows that were gonna be in the project longer than like a month, you know what I mean? So Ignite I wore only 4 times, and it's such a beautiful copper shade, so I loved every second of wearing this shade. And Wanderlust, this one right here, would have thought I'd reach for this way more. I only used it 1 time, which is crazy because this pairs so beautifully with Thrash, but I was having so much fun playing with Thrash and seeing it paired in different ways that I didn't want to just keep going back to the same standard kind of look that I've been used to. So Wanderlust only got used 1 time, which is just, I'm shocked because these are the kinds of tones that I absolutely love. These like dirty olive shades, these grungy greens, and like, I don't know, like lived in kind of metallic shades. That's like my thing. But yeah, I don't know. I just didn't feel the desire to use it. So yeah, Ignite only got 4 uses and Wanderlust got 1. There is a little bit of a dip happening in Ignite, but nothing like too significant or too apparent, but it definitely does look used. This palette as a whole is looking so well loved. It's so fun to see actually a newer palette to my collection looking so used and abused, and I've definitely had a lot of fun with it over this project pan. So now that this project is coming to a wrap, I wanted to just talk a little bit about where my eyeshadow collection stands. And I was actually able to hit pan on 15 eyeshadows in my collection through this project alone this year. And my goal in the beginning of the year was really just to hit pan on as many eyeshadows as it could. But I remember saying in the intro that I really wanted to hit pan on 1 shadow every single month. And I believe I did hit pan every update, but I wouldn't say that I did hit pan every month, but I did manage to hit the goal and exceed the goal of hitting pan on 12 eyeshadows if that's how that would add up. So I'm really happy to say that. Altogether, actually this year, I did hit pan on 19 eyeshadows in my collection, so I hit pan on an additional 4 shadows to the 15 that I hit pan on in this project, which is insane. So now, altogether, I actually have 29 eyeshadows in my collection that have pan, and I have 303 eyeshadow pans in total. So I have just shy of 10% of my eyeshadows panned. I am at 9.57% of my eyeshadow collection. It has pan in it. So I didn't have an end goal of percentage. It wasn't something I was thinking about in the beginning of this project, or really until I kind of just started thinking about this project wrapping up. So I'm quite happy with that. I would love to see that number go up higher next year. I want to be more conscientious of that next year. And I'm glad that I didn't really put that on myself for this last year, because I just ended up growing and changing my preferences just because, I mean, I'm going through a flux in my life right now, but also just because while I was focusing on the eyeshadows that exist in my collection, I wasn't purchasing new ones, and I haven't had a lot of time to think about buying new makeup as of late. And so I'm glad I didn't put the pressure on myself of like, I need to get down to 20% or I need to get to this. And it was really like, it's really cool to just look back and see that I've managed to make a pretty significant change in my eyeshadow consumption and in my purchasing habits as well. Like I said in this video earlier, I've only purchased 2 new eyeshadow palettes this year. I've acquired 3, however. The 3rd one I recently just got in PR. It's from Catrice, and it's a 9-pan eyeshadow palette. But otherwise, like, I think I bought a couple of singles at the very beginning of this year from Colourpop. So it's just crazy because I know last year and the year prior, I was like accumulating makeup like at an alarming rate, at a rate that I would never be able to consume what I was purchasing, and it was just hoarding for the sake of hoarding and showing it off, really. Next year, this project will virtually remain the same. However, I will make a few adaptations simply because I am working on my Pan That palette, and my lifestyle has changed quite a bit as well. So I will make some minor changes, and I really look forward to actually setting myself some more finite goals through next year. So maybe like every quarter, the video will be a little bit longer because I'll talk about my pan percentage or talk about and reflect on the palettes that have been added to my collection or something along those lines. So yeah, I really look forward to how this project is going to grow for 2020 for me, and I'm really happy I did this year. So thank you guys so much for watching. Thanks for being a part of this journey with me, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys.